Hello, my readers and writers. Please relax and have a listen to a Gonzo opinion response to Greg Howard's New York Times article, Power Play. I've worked many a job that is third shift and grew up in a household where my father at one time or another worked first, second, or third shift. There are many tricks I have picked up working third throughout the years to ensure regular quality sleep. This gave me a false confidence when I recently moved to the land of the seldom setting summer sun. Should have kept my ears open to the locals' advice on getting a SAD light, that's seasonal affective disorder. Anyway, so I'm walking downtown Anchorage very early one morning, having been awake for the better part of the last 30 hours. One thing that happens when you are on weird sleep time, which I certainly was, is that you end up waiting for businesses to open. You are all jazzed and ready for the day, and the only thing to greet you on your first errand is a close sign. Trust me, you've never read so many hours of operation signs as when you're on a weird sleep schedule. I'm smelling of Burberry cologne, freshly shaved and showered, dressed in clean clothes, and I approach this crosswalk at a light that I'm fairly certain has the longest wait time for pedestrians of any stoplight I've ever experienced. As happens at this waiting spot, the people began to accumulate. I decided to ask no one in particular if there were any coffee shops open at this time of day. No one said anything other than a couple of people shot me nervous glances. One dude even checked his wallet, as if there is a trend of caffeine-desperate, large-bearded, male pickpockets hitting Anchorage. The silence was finally broken by a big guy who dwarfed even me, and he was dressed in very dirty clothes. He suggested Kaladi's coffee shop, which is great, because he also said it was really close to the bus station I was going to need later. So what I got at Kaladi's coffee shop was a Kaladi's special. This was the best cup of coffee I have ever had. I don't say that lightly, though they did not like the joke I attempted to make about them needing to open a Kaladi's Pilates studio. I thought it was funny. The coffee tasted like what I imagined coffee would taste like if it was sweetened with the milk of corn-fed unicorns. I'm no expert, I just know it tasted absolutely fantastic. Thank you, friendly giant dirty dude. Highly caffeinated, energized, and going into my 34th hour of wakefulness, I took the short walk over to the bus station and began waiting for my bus to the Diamond Center, the number 2 bus. As a veteran now of many a bus station, I have to give respect to this bus station. Other bus stations I have been in, not in Anchorage, have been basically horror shows. Permanent stains on the walls and floors, broken or permanently closed restrooms. However, this station here in Anchorage is very clean. There are multiple staff on hand, multiple security officers, and even a little coffee shop with quite possibly the most reasonably priced food and drink items I have ever seen. You can take a look at my blog at www.iowaog.com. See that picture? Anyway, the more I ride the buses here, the more I am seeing the genius of a lot of what I had thought were flaws in the bus system here. The awkwardness and bizarre nuances the bus system has is mostly to dissuade visitors from using the bus. As well they should. Tourism is a big business here. There are taxis everywhere. Like I said, I'm more and more impressed with Anchorage every day, and though the bus system does steer the tourists towards the taxis here are actually very affordable and reasonable. I am glad that I kept my ears on and my mind open concerning the buses in Anchorage. That said, I misread the bus schedule and ended up at the bus stop about 25 minutes before the bus would leave. There are a lot of different places one can sit at the bus stop, and a good choice can be the difference between sitting quietly and dealing with a bus crazy, up close and personal for the extent of your wait. I was debating sitting next to screaming Bluetooth woman, or occasionally sings out loud headphones dude, or I'm so important that I have to make this call and talk really loud right now guy. When I noticed this old duffer, he's probably in his late 60s, who was almost as big as me and had face tattoos, I decided to sit next to him and noticed he was getting ready to fly a sign. Now, flying a sign is homeless slang, There are many other names for it, but for normies, the term would be panhandling. I must admit, when I sat down next to this guy, I was expecting to get hit by the smell of 3-day-old body odor and 4, possibly 5-day-old urine. This was not the case, as all I could smell was a healthy dose of clean, possibly Coast, body soap, coming from the elderly man intent on creating the perfect sign. He was struggling to write his plea on a piece of torn cardboard using only a ballpoint blue pen. So I reached into my backpack and took out a black permanent marker and handed it wordlessly to the old tattoo-faced man. I color a lot. We did the man thing and didn't say anything other than a quiet nod. We sat in some silence for a time while he made a sign, and I wondered if he would talk at all. Let's be honest, I suck at being quiet. I totally broke the truce of silence first. That cardboard is too small and looks all ripped up. Start at McDonald's, but then just go to every store you can in rapid succession asking for cardboard. You'll be surprised how fast you get someone giving a ton of clean, whole cardboard. Now, this part's important. Stash that somewhere and always keep the top piece so as to protect the others from the weather, and just leave it in your stash spot. Also, that pen is outrageous. No one's going to see it. And the black permanent marker that I just gave you, it does make you look like everyone else flying a sign. Get some crayons. People love the varied colors, and it won't run if you get sweaty or it rains. Finally, I see you're putting your life story on that. Don't. People get overwhelmed. Just put 1 or 2 very colorfully drawn words on your sign. Hungry is a pretty good place to start. Spewing all my knowledge of sign flying at this nice, old, clean, face-tattooed individual. Well, geez, yeah, that would work, the old duffer says to me. We ended up talking quietly for the remainder of my wait, and I learned all about his circumstance. Stroke, relationship trouble, drinking trouble, poor choices on locations of tattoo at an early age, and many other troubles had befallen this fella. I offered the only hope I could at this point in my life, a black permanent marker and a listening ear. He told me several times that people don't normally talk to him, and he was appreciative for my help. I was putting the black permanent marker back in my pack as the bus pulled up when the old man asked me, "How the heck do you know so much about flying signs? You don't seem the type." Would have loved to explain to him how I've never actually flown a sign, but I had gotten to know and respect someone who could write a doctorate-level thesis on the subject. I wish I could have told him about how this guy was one of the most caring, loving individuals I have ever known, and how I had made the mistake of turning my ears off when I had first met him, because of the way he looked. Would have liked to have, but I didn't have the time. This is what I would have liked to have told the old duffer. The scene is a couple years ago in a homeless mission in Portland. I am a recent addition to a work program this mission had that would accept those most undesirable of homeless, those without drug and alcohol addiction. Seems weird, but being homeless while not addicted is a huge burden, as most programs won't even talk to you. Even if you tell them you are a recovering alcoholic, which I am, fully admit that, they stop the conversation when you tell them it's been 6 years since you've had a drop. My bad, I guess. This particular program required that you spend 2 weeks at the emergency shelter before getting into the work program, which meant a giant room filled with 85 homeless men every night. Loud, cramped, and highly hostile. It was not a fun experience for me. That said, I was very grateful for a place to stay, and I know there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and I was appreciative for the place to stay. That said, that light came when I got moved up to the 4th floor of the building, where there were 12-man rooms, a much better number, and I was looking forward to the higher quality of sleep. Now, the first night I was in the 12-man room, I can remember savoring every moment of being able to relax in the common room, just watching TV until 11 p.m. It might not seem like much to you, but it was a quiet place where I didn't have to worry about getting messed with, and no one was looking at me judgmentally. It's a thing when you're homeless. It felt good. It is 11 p.m., lights out, and I'm headed for the top bunk I was assigned in the 12-man room. Yeah, you read that right. I, a grown 330-pound man, had a top bunk. Now, these were no mess around bunks made from solid steel and reinforced beyond all measure. I tested it a little before, but like an idiot, I had never actually gotten into the bed. Now, you're going to need to know some more homeless slang. In a situation like this, the person you share the bunk bed with is called your bunkie. Now, my bunkie was a man by the name of Samson, who had about 2 teeth in his head, and at first glance, he was perhaps the most sour individual who had ever walked the face of the planet. He was salty, just about everyone, even the staff, and the only reason he could do this was because on his chest was a fresh scar from a triple bypass surgery. I later learned he had come straight from the hospital after surgery and had been in the mission for almost 7 months. All this to say, though, that I dismissed him as someone who should be avoided based solely on how he looked, and hadn't actually engaged in a conversation. So I'm testing out the ladder to the top bunk, trying to climb in quietly as to not disturb the other men sleeping in the dark room. I was the youngest person in the room, and was also the only one to stay awake until 11 p.m. Go figure. 1 foot, then 2, then 3. I'm almost into the top bunk when I feel the bunk begin to lean. Instead of jumping forward, I ended up leaning backwards, and then slamming forward. Not a ballerina. Now, this was not fun for me, and it really wasn't fun for Samson, who was sound asleep when suddenly a 9.8 earthquake in the form of this idiot decided to mess up his sleep. Did eventually make it to the top bunk, but not until after we had discovered there was a leg that somehow was loose, which is what caused the rocking of the bed, which is what I made Samson promise to tell everyone. Anyway, and the fact that I am not going to be hired as a horse jockey anytime in the near future is probably another reason there. Needless to say, the friendship between Samson and I had a rocky start. But as weird as that start was, it didn't get me to turn on my ears and listen to Randy. It did get me to turn on my ears and listen to Randy. Unfortunately, the first thing I got to hear that night, and many a night after, was him sleeping. Samson had 2 modes of sleeping. One way he slept involved snoring, punctuated by a steady stream of cursing. Usually, like a couple snores and then a random F-bomb or a C-word. The man loved the C-word. This was preferable to the other mode with which he slept, which was like the pug from the Adam Sandler movie Little Nicky, where he would snore really deeply and loudly on the intake and then say the really quiet, high-pitched niceties on the exhale. Horrifying. Just horrifying. Then again, I probably don't I don't sound super fantastic when I sleep either. We did learn to be friends, though. I learned a lot about life from Samson. I've never flown a sign. In fact, I've always kind of looked down on those who have. However, right around Christmas time, Samson came back to the mission with a $1,000 day panhandling. And my curiosity got the better of me, and I had to ask him how he managed that. This is when he told me the advice I gave the elderly gentleman at the bus stop here in Anchorage. He also told me how grateful he was to be in a mission and how he thought a couple years ago he had his best Christmas ever. But now knew the Christmas we had just shared at the mission was even better. Yeah. See, Samson had been homeless for over 20 years. In those years, a lot of times he was so drunk that he couldn't get into shelters, even on Christmas. Whereas I wasn't drunk enough for a helping hand, Samson was too drunk. A couple of years before this, Samson had been picked up mistakenly as a person of interest in a missing woman case because he ran his mouth at an inopportune time. The story goes, Samson was sleeping outside in a tent by the Willamette, however you say it, river in late December, drunk. He had been awoken by the police who were pursuing a missing woman case. When Samson emerged from his tent, the police officer had said, "I'm looking for a woman." And before the cop could finish what he was going to say, Samson butted in with, "So am I," and found himself promptly arrested. So Samson spent Christmas in jail that year. And when he relayed the next part, his eyes actually watered up slightly. In the cell he was in, there was just a sliver of a crack that you could look out and see the outside. The guys in the cell took turns looking out the crack and imagining they were free. on this Christmas Eve. Samson made out like a bandit, though, because when his turn came around to look out the crack, he would trade it for a smoke. The entire time, he never did look out that window, and tells me it was the happiest Christmas he could ever remember. How can that be? He was in a jail. Well, in Portland, snow is a pretty rare thing. When it does come, it is hard to get into a shelter, particularly if you're blacklisted like Samson was. Samson would have spent the Christmas outside like he had many a Christmas before. Yeah, the fact that he was inside, getting 3 hots and a cot, meant from his point of view, this really was the best Christmas ever. Samson ended up using the money he got from flying that sign, plus a small grant from the city, to get an apartment. And as he said, his days of hard living were over. I learned a lot from Samson, such as wisdom comes in all forms, how to fly a sign, which might come in handy since I'm thinking about doing the hitchhiking thing. YOLO. I am very grateful to have been assigned to be Samson's monkey, as I would have normally dismissed this vulgar, single-toothed, loud-mouthed individual, and never been reminded that sometimes, behind aesthetic ugliness, can lie great inner beauty. Back to Anchorage. I reflected upon my conversation with the old duffer, and I thought about my experience with Samson as I rode the bus to the Diamond Mall. I felt blessed for having my experience, and with both individuals. Deep in thought, with, I am sad to admit, a techno remix of What Is Love playing in my ears, I accidentally pulled a stop string 2 stops early. Too embarrassed to say anything, and not minding that I would get to experience some of the Alaskan fresh air, I got off the bus and walked the rest of the way to the mall. As happens when you are a bus rider, I had to cut through several parking lots. As I walked through one of these parking lots, a woman saw me and got bug-eyed. She then got in her car as quick as she could and locked the doors. Cell phone held in a death grip. I shrugged it off, thinking, "Lady, don't hurt me. What is love?" I did notice the car was a rental, and using my expert detective skills, I assumed she was a tourist. I passed several other vehicles from Alaskan plates with people of different genders and races. Not one of them gave me any notice at all, and then a couple of them said, "Hello." The hello thing I am noticing is really common here in Alaska, even in situations walking along the side of the road. I love this. It reminds me of the common courtesies that are the norm in the heartland. It really is nice. After doing my errands at the mall, I walked to the Diamond Transit Center, which is, surprise, surprise, close to the Diamond Mall. While waiting for the bus again, I read a New York Times article by Greg Howard called Power Play. In this article, he accuses white women of being racist for not giving him adequate space while walking down the sidewalk. I'm paraphrasing. I invite you to read the article. It deserved a response, so here's my response. Greg, I'm very versed in what it feels like to have people immediately assume the worst when seeing you. I've discussed some of these instances in this post and another post, and as an eternal pedestrian, I know it will happen again. When people react with fear upon the sight of you, it sucks royally. It feels like somebody jammed their finger in your belly button and kicked you in the testicles. I get that. That said, I do take some issue with some of the claims from the article, particularly your targeting of white women. But first I want to talk about a couple sentences. From your article, there are many times in a day when a person is walking toward me in my path. In these situations, we both generally make minor adjustments upon our approach. So this is where, in my opinion, a pretty big mistake was made. While walking, you should be aware of your surroundings, absolutely. And this includes summing a person up for your own safety, just as they are probably going to be doing to you also. But don't make adjustments every time you pass someone. 1, that sounds exhausting. And 2, you're forcing an interaction where an interaction doesn't really need to take place between 2 random people on the sidewalk. I've been in a lot of situations throughout my life that many would consider dangerous. The one overriding thing I've learned is that the safest attitude you can have is confidence. When you adjust yourself, Greg Howard, to every passerby, you are walking without confidence. You are projecting nervousness, which reads as a danger sign. Blaming people and making yourself the victim is not the ticket. Talking about positive experiences and the enrichment one can gain from individuals outside your normal comfort zone will get you much better, productive, and fulfilling results. See, everything I've said before this point in the video, I love Gonzo. Now, onto your race baiting, which, to be clear, I define as the use of racially derisive language, actions, or other forms of communication in order to anger or intimidate or coerce. Now, you said in your article that you've had white women as friends and sisters, mothers, and lovers. The very fact that you would champion these relationships as a means to make you an expert on the minds of women, especially white women, leads me to seriously doubt the veracity of dialogue in these relationships you claim to have had. See, the fact that you felt it necessary to point out that these people were specifically white exacerbates a reality that faces women. The source I'm about to quote is from multiple trainings I've went to for cumulative trauma. Also, of note, the following gender claims will be generalities, not absolutes. Men tend to disconnect from emotional situations. Note my reaction to the woman freaking out and getting into her car. Shrug. Back to my music. What is love? Lady, don't hurt me. Just ignored it. Or when I made a joke about caffeine-deprived pickpockets when I was shunned at that stoplight, I dismissed it. According to cumulative trauma seminars, women tend to do the exact opposite. They take on more and more and more emotional burdens. One way is not better or worse, it's just different. And we all, regardless of self-identified gender, will react either way. I gave you a couple examples, but I also, when I talked about the joy I felt from having a quiet, non-judgmental place, when I first got into the homeless shelter, I was taking too much on. You say in your article about white women, sometimes they're buried in their phones. Other times, they're in pairs and groups and in conversation. I think you're missing a key dynamic here. And once again, I'm basing this on multiple cumulative trauma seminars I've been to. You are missing the fact that when these people you've identified as white women are on the phone, they're not talking to the person on the phone. No. They are running through multiple future conversations that may or may not happen. Their minds are reviewing past conversations that did happen and trying to find mistakes that may or may not have happened. What do I need to do when I get to work? What errands do I need to run on my lunch break? What to make for supper? What bills to pay with the next paycheck? And the next paycheck. Is that random bald bearded dude looking at me, trying to figure out what he could write is going on in a woman's head without catching a whole bunch of grief? Gosh, his beard is awesome. You can roll your eyes. It's okay. So man up, Greg. You are not the most important interaction in this person's life you are randomly walking by. Sorry if that hurts your feelings. Please do not reciprocate with hatred like you're doing when you blame all white women. Now, Greg, you might be thinking, why don't these, in your words, white women, just let all those thoughts go? It is so easy. Well, that's because you're a dude, just like me. You've emotionally cut everything out of the world, except you and this person approaching you on the street. Nothing else matters, thus making that interaction the most important thing for you at that moment. That is very manly thinking. I get it. I do it myself. I'm a dude. But as a dude, I can also tell you that it is possible to listen and understand where someone is coming from, even when they are not wired the same. Life is all about perspective. I can't imagine sitting in a jail cell on Christmas Eve just thrilled. But I can listen to, and I can acknowledge someone who has. I'm not getting a face tattoo anytime in the future, but I can give empathy and a permanent marker, a little bit of advice on sign flying to someone who has. I'm a human. You can listen to other humans. So can you. You need to talk with people, not talk at people. There is no race or gender monopoly on empathy. Stop with the race baiting. Just stop, Greg. In closing, the great Trinidadian German wise man, Nestor Alexander Hathaway, once said, "I don't know why you're not fair. I give you my love, but you don't care. So what is right and what is wrong? Give me a sign." It's deep. Sometimes you aren't going to get that sign from people walking down the street. Sometimes people are thinking of loved ones whom they take on too many burdens for, and they don't have time for your crap, Greg Howard. So take heed from Hathaway's sage advice. What is love? Lady, don't hurt me. Note to Greg Howard. I wrote this because I, as a man, felt you needed to hear another man's perspective on the race baiting you spewed. I invite you to talk with white women about how you feel. Make sure to tell them about how you needed to be taught to not body check random people and couldn't empathize that realization on your own. I'm sure they will love it. Good luck. The end. Well, thank you for listening. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. If you really liked it, have a look-see at my Patreon link in the video description. Until next time, I'll be writing. I hope you are too. You're right on when you're writing on.